Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be doing a two-part series talking about the differences between watercolor and gouache. So I'm going to be doing two different pieces, one watercolor, one gouache, and I'm going to be showing you all the difference in techniques, how to use it, just walking you step by step while I do a speed painting of both. But I'm gonna split this up into two videos so that y'all don't get too confused as to what's what. So for the first video, I'm going to be showing y'all how to use watercolor in an effective way to get the results you want and to use it as it is, as a medium, as a watercolor medium, to get those flowing effects and to paint what you want to paint in a vibrant way. So the first thing you do when you're starting any painting, whether it be watercolor, gouache, acrylic, is that I usually make a quick sketch of what I want on the page before, so you would have a guide as to where you're putting the paint. In terms of watercolor, however, the sketch that you're doing has to be very light, because if it is deep pencil marks, then if you try to erase it afterwards, it won't come out and you would actually see the pencil marks on the final piece, and that is what we don't want. So definitely do a light sketch on the paper. Now, after you finish doing the sketch, once you know where your colors are going and you have color coordinated your entire piece, you do a wash of that color onto the space. So a wash is basically the base color that you're going to use, but you apply lots of water on it. As you can see in the beginning, I applied water throughout the whole area, and then I applied color. Well, I mixed in water with the color and then apply a light wash over it. And as you can see here, I am using the tissue paper to actually raise up some of the color that you put down, so that if you make a mistake, you could and it's already wet, you can always use a tissue and dampen that area so that the water lifts up from the page onto the tissue. That is just one way of getting color removed or getting white areas onto your page. However, there are many other ways, such as you could completely leave it blank. As you can see in some areas of this painting, I have left it white and paint around that. Or you can use masking fluid, which is basically another fluid that you put onto the page before you start painting, and once you put paint over the masking fluid, it doesn't touch the page, and at the end of the painting you could easily peel away the masking fluid and reveal the white layer underneath. So here I am adding in the dark areas that I know is going to be dark, and I'm adding the darkest colors first, so that I would have an idea of where I'm putting my lights and darks, so I would know where not to interact with my lighter colors. And even with the lighter areas, I'm putting it, and then I'm putting a different color on it, but I'm putting it at extreme ends so as not to blend. If you don't want it to blend too much, because as I'm putting the yellow and then I'm putting a pink on the other end, and I'm slowly merging it together, because if you just put a bunch of water on it, then the yellow would mix with the pink, it'll give you an orangey effect and it'll spread, and you don't want that. So if you want your separate colors, you use a tiny bit of water and you ease into it and you mix it slowly. And here I would like to tell you that watercolor dries 2 shades lighter than when you put it down. So because it's watercolor, the intensity of the color that you put down on the page would not be the same color or the shade that it is when it is dry. When it's dry, all the water evaporates or soaks into the paper, and then you get a much lighter color. So that is why in watercolor, if you want a good effect, you would have to put layers on top of it, but the layers you would not definitively see like selective layers. You won't see the separate layers once you blend, because if you put a layer on top of, if you put a darker layer on top of the lighter one, you could always use water to blend it in so that you would get a gradated effect. And one thing you cannot possibly do with watercolor is that you cannot put light on top of dark unless it is a very intense color, such as Peruvian blue, which is really intense, and you would actually see the blue itself on top of a dark color. Other colors you would not see, like you cannot put a yellow on top of a purple and expect to see the yellow. No, you would see a color, but it will be a much darker color. So paintings of clouds and skies, you really want to use a smaller brush. Like you use a wash, a big brush for the wash, but then you ideally want to use a smaller brush to capture the fluffiness of the clouds, and you go in with layers. So you add light layers first, and then you go with a bit dark and then a bit darker to build upon 2-3 layers, or as much as you see comfortable, you see fit. Also, what I do want to talk about is the weight of the paper. So there are many different weights of watercolor paper, and it all depends on how much water you are actually intended to use. So the heavier papers would actually hold much more water, whereas the lighter paper would absorb the water still, but then after a while of adding water on water, you would kind of see that the paper itself is kind of morphing and warping, so that at the end, when you peel off your tape that's holding it down, it'll actually wouldn't be extremely flat, and it will kind of be a bit wavy, and you don't really want that. So I do suggest that you get a paper that's more on the heavier side. Currently, this page that I'm using is 300 GSM, which stands for 300 grams per square meter, which is kind of on the heavier side. So that is why you don't really see much warping after I use a lot of color. But if you use lighter ones, such as 100, 200, you would see that warping effect with the thinner layers. When you're painting watercolor or gouache, because you're using water, the page tends to lift up when you apply much more water. So what you want to do is that you want to secure your page down onto your surface with either tape, or you could use blue tack, but I would recommend taping down the edges or at the back of it if you're planning to use the entire page. Using watercolor, you definitely want to put a lot of layers, especially with this type of painting, which is a sky. You would want that fluffy textural sky effect, and therefore you want to go with many layers of it. But in certain areas you want the lighter, the darker. Use your tissue, and when you put a dark area, use your tissue and create a bit of texture, raising some color off the page. Like let it flow, you know, let the water flow in your different areas and let it mix with each other and give you that watercolor effect. And as you can see, I left out the space for the lamppost white. Well, most of it's white, so that in the end, because it's a very dark paint that I'm going to use on that one, I eventually wanted to do it last. So I left the white spacing, but you didn't have to use the white spacing. You could have painted over it and then put the black on it. Because it's so dark, it will come off on the lighter areas, but I decided to do it last anyway, so just show you how you could leave things blank. And then for the black lines, you definitely want to do that last, because if you did it first and then you put your blues and yellow and pink on top of it, it would have maybe raised some of the black off of the page and mixed into your yellow and pink, and it wouldn't be just yellow and pink. It'll be like a brownish color, and you don't really want that. So definitely don't mix your darks and lights when they are close together. Definitely put the lights first and then put the darks on top of that. You liked this video. This was on watercolor, and I hope that my tips and techniques really helped you to gain a better understanding of how to use watercolor and for you to produce your pieces much more brilliantly. And leave your comments below. Tell me what you thought about it, if it was good techniques, if it helped you, if it didn't help you, if you have other techniques on how to use it. And stay tuned next week for my second part of the series to show you how to use gouache, to show you all about how to use. You know what, I'm not even gonna try to hide this mic anymore because yeah.